Is the art of letter writing really dead? What's up, people? You're saying, what are you doing, Miss Crocker, sitting there at a table with all this stuff spread out before it? What kind of video are you going to show us? Well, I just got to thinking about letter writing, and do we even do it anymore? We want to talk to somebody now. We call them, FaceTime them, text, email, Facebook, just about any other way besides writing a letter. But back in the day, we wrote letters, and I have all this proof of it. This is not junk. This is all treasured possessions to me. And so I'm just going to share some of this stuff with you. And as I'm sharing, I want you to think back in your life. Do you remember ever getting an important letter in the mail from someone or from some place that was so special to you that you hung on to that letter for a very long time? Well, all of these are very special to me, and I will hang on to them until I die, and then they will be up to Matt, Jason, and Jared to decide what to do with them, because I doubt very seriously George is ever going to look at them. Is that right, honey?
Yeah, that's right.
So I just kind of wanted to go back in time. These things are from my grandmother that she wrote to my mom. My mom was living in Atmore, Alabama, and my grandmother was living in Florida. And this one was Mulberry, Florida. And that was her handwriting. And then this was a card. I guess it was two different times, but it was a handwritten postcard from back in the day. Let's see if I can even, let me grab my magnifying glass. I don't know what year that was, but I know it was old. And then in with that also was a letter also from my grandmother, a handwritten letter in my granny's handwriting to my mom and my dad. And so I would have to have some assistance reading this. I cannot read this small print, but it doesn't matter whether I read it or not. I know that that was written by my grandmother to my mom, and that's very special. And in this stuff I had, it was a picture of my grandparents' burial site. Where I grew up, they're real big on taking care of cemetery plots. Also, my granddaddy's obituary from the newspaper. I don't want to get any closer with that. I don't really want y'all to read all the details, but that's what it is. And so these were handwritten letters to my mother from her mother, my grandmother. And then I have a few letters from my mother to me, or to us, to our whole family. I've told the story before, but it bears repeating. I had just turned 19 when we moved over here to South Texas from South Alabama. And my mom was about to have a hissy fit. And I'd lived over here about 2 months, and mom and dad came to visit. I think we moved over here in September or October of '78, and they came to visit for Christmas. And before they left, my dad pulled me aside and he said, you know, you up and went 800 miles across the country from your mama. You left her. He said, I think the least you can do is write her a letter once a week. And I said, yes, sir, I will do. And so I want y'all to know, for 20 years it was from 1979 to 1999, we wrote letters every week. My mother would sit down on a Sunday afternoon and write to me, and I would sit down on a Sunday afternoon and write to her. And we did it for 20 years. And then after 20 years, we decided we would pick up the phone and call each other every week instead of writing. But we would call all that time too. We didn't just write, but it was a ritual. And you know, some of them are still in the envelopes. She wrote, she had little notepad. She wrote very tiny. I could read it back then. Look, page after page after page after page. And that was just 1 week. And I think most of these that I've saved, as I was looking at the date, seem to be from that 1998 period, that last year or so that we were writing letters. If I had saved every one of them, let's see what that would be. 52 weeks in a year, so it'd be 52 letters a year times 20 years. That's a lot of letters. I didn't save them all, but I do have some. And she wrote on large notebook paper. Front and back and front and back. It was just her and my dad. I really don't know what she had to talk about. I always had the kids to talk about, and before we had kids, at least, you know, what George and I were doing. But just letters on cards. It looks, well, no, it's paper, but it's so old and crusty. It had stationery. Let's see. There was no year on it. She always wrote the same. Just letter after letter after letter. And it wasn't always just a letter that my mama wrote either. She would send newspaper clippings of obituaries, birth announcements, marriage announcements, people that she thought I would know. And just some of the things that were in some of those letters that I found. What's this say? There was well, first of all, I'll show you this. This was a picture. The newspaper came by as my dad was trimming trees, and he got his picture in the paper, trimming trees. His own trees. He wasn't doing it. A day in the life, it says. A day in the life. Oh, live action, folks. That was just the tree, not him. But I don't know what year that was either. I can't see. But she would always send clippings like that. And then there was a earthquake. Earthquake rocks Atmore. Of course, that was of big interest to them, and she wanted to share it. This was October 26, 1997 that happened, the earthquake in Atmore. And more articles about the earthquake that she just happened to clip out and send to me. And Trimmer wakes sleeping residents, same thing. And this was about Up Home, Alabama, it's called. Talking about proud heritage, in Native American heritage and things like that. So she was always sending just about anything and everything. And but it wasn't a one-way street. It was a two-way street, because I've had her things. She's been passed away for 16 years, and I've had them boxed up. And just the beginning of this pandemic, maybe, when I was not knowing what to do with myself, I went and looked up pulled out all this stuff and was just reliving it. And in Mama's stuff was just a stack of stuff that had come from our home to hers. And this was written this came to Mama and Daddy from Matt when Matt was a baby. I don't think Matt really colored that, but maybe he did. And we would send things like that in the letters with her, so that, this was Matt's handwriting. So we taught him to write letters at a young age. Dear Grandma and Grandpa. I don't know if you're able to see it, but, again, I don't really want you to see what the writing is, but just the fact that she kept our letters, I kept hers, and just all kind of things. We would even send the kids weekly readers showing that their work on them, and sometimes I would include their spelling test for the week or something like that, because I thought, you know, she wasn't around them. She only got to see them twice a year. They'd come over here once a year and we'd go over there once a year. And so we did whatever we could. Just imagine if we'd have FaceTime back then, and, you know, YouTube, times would have just been different. But this was a letter that I had written to them, and was getting decorative with the envelopes. You get tired of writing the same envelopes, same stuff all the time. So could try to kick it up a notch. And this one was as good as it gets for letter writing. Look at this. This whole thing was a letter. Pages and pages and pages, front side only, of when we went on our vacation to the Four Corners. It was Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. And so when I got back from that trip, I wrote my mom this huge letter. Look at that. That's long pages. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 and a half pages handwritten about our trip. And what better written memory of our trip to our boys, because they know it's here and they can go back and read all about that trip in my own words as I wrote it. So I have the original somewhere. This was a copy, I guess, that I'd sent to them. But all kind of letters from me on notebook paper, on good envelopes, not so good envelopes, just week after week after week, cards, letters. I didn't send her coupons, but we sent things, you know, from the boys. On and on and on, cards that we sent. And then more of them right here too. Just to show you things that she had from us. Sunday school papers they colored and sent. Priceless things only a mother or a grandmother could love, that's for sure. I mean, we sent, even when they didn't know how to color or do anything, we sent it just so they would be in the loop with the kids. And some of this stuff that Mama's was a crossword puzzle that she had completed. She did one of those every day. I'm pretty sure she did it in the newspaper, and this was from a magazine too. But that's just good memories for me, because I saw her every day sitting with her legs curled under working her crossword puzzles. And so that's just from my grandmother to my mother, from my mother to me, and from me back to my mother. But old George was a good letter writer too. Now, he never really had the opportunity or the need to write me a letter, because we were pretty much always together. But he was a darn good poem writer, I'll tell you that. And what's better than a good letter is a good poem. And he even made me this little book one year for Valentine's Day. Made the book. And again, I'm not going to read all these things out loud, but it was handwritten by George to me on Valentine's Day. And he wrote a poem that says it was from Jared, and one from Jason. Of course, they're all in George's handwriting. And let's see here. And one from Matt. Happy Hearts Day, he put. So I guess this front page was from him. Just for you. So he wrote me poems, not only from him to me, but from each boy to me. and he catered them to their needs, how they would talk, how they would, what they would probably say to me and such. So that's not all, folks. There's more. What does that say? Happy birthday letters and poems he wrote me. And let's see. Happy birthday, honey. You can tell they're old. Look at the paper and the tape where I had them saved. Just look at that. And then this was another one that he did. He wrote for himself and one for each boy. And we had them in those album covers. All in George's handwriting. All made up by George. Pretty sweet old fella George is. And something else that I ran across as I was just digging through all my stuff were these letters. And when Jared was 3 weeks shy of being 3 years old, he had a lawnmower accident and he lost his left leg below the knee. And he was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And George and I stayed there 24/7 for that whole time. It was an hour away from where we live. And George's mom and George's brother Vern took care of Jason and Matt while we were there. And there was this young man in the hospital named Michael. And he was like kind of like a candy striper in the hospital. He was a volunteer. But he had been in that children's hospital himself because he has cystic fibrosis. And so we just kind of adopted him. He was so good to us and to Jared. And this is a handwritten letter from him, from Michael, to us after we had left the hospital and everything. He wrote a long little letter in his own handwriting. And he wrote stuff, like check the right answer, and he would pick the right answer. I think he was about 12, maybe 14 back then. And so it was real nice to know that he had not forgotten of us after Jared got out of the hospital. So to receive that was priceless. But then a few years later, I received a letter from his mother, handwritten from his mom, saying that she regretted to inform us that her son had passed away. And she took the time to not only write a note, but a full page about the impact that we had on Michael's life. And certainly he had an impact on ours. So those were very special letters. And then I'm going to kind of wind all this up by saying I thought the art of letter writing was dead. I can't tell you the last time I wrote a letter. But people do. And this is a letter that we received from one of our subscribers. And we got it within the last 3 or 4 months. And y'all just have to check this out. It's long. I'm not going to tell you who it's from. I'm not going to tell you what it was about. But it was priceless. Look, front, back, and front. And I did not toss it in the trash can. It spoke to us. It spoke to George, and we're going to keep it. And now when you see that name under a comment, it's not just like, okay, there's that name. It's like, oh, that's the one that wrote us that long letter, So if you have a child, I encourage you to teach that child how to write letters. And the best way to learn how to do that is when they receive a gift, they should send a thank you note. That's another big thing for me. You can ask any of my kids. They oh, they hated it whenever they had to get a gift and I had to write a thank you note for it, because I would sit right here at the table with them and made sure they did it in their own handwriting and their own words. So I encourage you to teach your child how to write a letter. If it doesn't matter how old they are, it's the memories, and that piece of paper is probably not going to get tossed like a text will get deleted. So maybe I've encouraged you to go back and dig through some of your stuff. I have all these pretty card boxes like this that cards came in, and they open up like this, and this is stuff that I have of my mom's there in that box. But get you some, go back and look through some of your stuff. I know everybody has stuff like this. I don't know where y'all keep yours. I had those in a cedar chest that was also got for my mother. And it's nice going back and reading over them. It's nice thinking about people that sat down and took the time to write, whether it was your grandma, your mom, your husband, your child, whether it was someone you met in life that made a great impact on you, or maybe we made an impact on someone else. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe. If it's the first time you're watching, please watch some of our other videos. I'm not always sitting here by myself. My husband George and I are together and retired, and we have goats and chickens and dogs and a cat. The cat never gets on TV because she's always asleep somewhere. And anyway, y'all go out and make it a great day and write somebody a letter. Write me a letter. Our P.O. box is in the description below all of our videos here, so write me a letter. I'd love to hear from you. Y'all have a good day now, you hear?